Hello guys, this is Adam. I hope that you are doing good, and today we will be testing Blender 3.2.1 on the M1 Max. Just quickly explaining the setup that we have: the M1 Max with 64GB of RAM and then 32-core GPU with 10-core CPU plus the 8TB SSD, which means this is the highest spec'd out M1 Max 16-inch MacBook Pro. The power profile is set on high so we can get the best performance that we can get, and as well as connected to an external monitor just for the power, but it doesn't matter. And then I do have it connected to my MacBook Air on my left side, where I am recording the audio and then recording the screen, which means the screen, it's giving a notification it's being recorded, but actually it's being recorded externally, so it would not affect the performance that we are having right now. But aside from that, let's go ahead and click Renderu and then see how long this would take, and does the performance improve on the 3.2.1 compared to the first version. So on the M1 Max it was done, and it was done with 36 seconds. That's actually interesting because usually with a 3.1 this takes around 40 seconds, so the difference is 4 seconds. Now, if the difference was around 2 seconds, I would say it's in the margin of error, but 4 seconds, that means this is actually better, which is very interesting. And that would later bring me actually to trying that against the 6900 XT again. However, this time would be with the updated version, so this video should come out hopefully tomorrow. Now, what I want to do, I want to take a quick look at the settings just to show them to you. So with the settings, I do have the Apple M1 Max GPU through the middle, and then it's the experimental future set. We will definitely do the supported future set right now and see if there is any difference in terms of rendering. And then what I noticed is actually if I open the CPU and the GPU, the performance will take a hit where only the GPU does better, but we will test them both right now. So right now what I will do, I will test the GPU, and then after the GPU we will see if there is any difference with the supported future set, and then after the future set we will definitely enable M1 Max the CPU as well, and then we will do a render and then we will see. So let's go ahead and click render and see if there is any difference when it comes to supported. So that to render took 35 seconds, so I would say it's in the margin of error, so it's the same performance whether you are doing supported or whether you are doing the other way around. So we will keep it on supported, and then we will enable M1 Max as well, so we will have both GPU and then CPU, and then we will go ahead and click render, and then we will see how long that would take compared to having only the GPU, because in my experience having only the GPU should be faster, but we will see how that goes now. And right now we are done, and we are looking at 44 seconds, which means I was actually right, because if you enable the GPU and the CPU at the same time, the performance becomes worse rather than having the GPU only. I will open the activity monitor, and then we will be looking at these results while we are recording. So I will just have them here on the side, so I'm gonna close that, gonna render this again with the same settings just so we can understand what's going on, why it is slower rather than we do the GPU only. So looking at the cores, all the cores of the CPU are being used. When it comes to the GPU is not being used as much as it should. I think what's happening right here, since it's only one SoC, it's giving a higher priority for the CPU rather than the GPU. Therefore, when you open them both, it will be depending heavily on the CPU instead of the GPU, and that's something you don't want because the GPU performance is better than the CPU anyway. And we got 43 seconds 0.65, which means technically 44 or 35. We have it like that because when you open them both, it will give a higher priority for the CPU. So I will turn that off, and then we will go ahead and render again, and we should be able to see that the GPU would actually have a higher usage rather than the CPU, if my theory is correct. So far seems like my theory is actually correct because we're not using much of the CPU. The CPU, we are only using 2 proficiency cores, and then everything else is slowed down, and we are heavily dependent on the GPU, which means that would be giving us a better performance with the GPU rather than the CPU. And I was actually right. So we did end. That frame took 35 seconds to render rather than 10 seconds more, simply because we were using only the GPU rather than everything else, which means when you run only the GPU, the CPU wouldn't have heavy emphasis on it, and the GPU would do a better performance. So that is interesting, and I will do a more video in depth about it in the future so people can know about it. That is the first test. The second test that I want to do, the BMW scene. So just making sure that we have M1 Max GPU, everything is set, and then from experimental to supported, and then we will go ahead and render. So that did end, and it took only 53 seconds. So that is 1 second difference between that and then 3.1. So I would say it's the same performance overall, just there is a little bit of quality of life where supported is doing better. If I were you and then I am using the M1 Max with the new Blender version, I will have everything on supported with cycles and then go there. It's a decent performance, and overall it is good. If you want to see the difference between that and a PC, watch the previous video that I did share. But aside from that, have a wonderful day, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye bye.